So I've got the numbers pulled up, and NBC just goes by the key states that matter. And they say in Arizona, they have until November 23rd to finalize their local results. The Secretary of State certifies statewide results on the 30th. In Pennsylvania, they have until November 10th for unofficial vote tallies to be provided to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. November 23rd is the last day for local officials to submit certified election results. If there's a difference of 0.5% or less, then the Secretary must order a recount by November 12th. If at least 3 voters in each county allege errors or discrepancies in the count, a recount could also be triggered. Any recount must be completed by November 24th, and local election officials must submit certified recount results to the Secretary by the 25th. In Michigan, November 17th, for their local election officials must complete counting by the 17th, provide the results by the 23rd for certification. Any petitions for recount must be submitted by the 25th. Wisconsin, they say, is the 17th, and then, there's some special rules. 13th for Georgia, followed by the 20th to certify unofficial results on the 13th. North Carolina, okay. We go to December 8th, last day for states to resolve election disputes. States must certify election outcomes at least 6 days before the Electoral College meets, known as the safe harbor deadline, if they want to avoid Congress getting involved in resolving potential disputes. That means any court challenges to state election results must be settled by December 8th, 2020. If states certify election outcomes by this deadline, Congress must accept the results as valid. December 14th, electors cast their ballots. They meet in their respective states to cast their ballots for president and vice president on the second Monday after the second Wednesday in December. In every state except Nebraska and Maine, electors vote on winner-takes-all basis. This we understand, and then some are split. December 23rd, President of the Senate receives electoral vote certificates. By January 6th, Congress counts electoral votes. And on January 20th, they inaugurate the new president.
So if there's a pending court case by December 8th, and the state is unable to deliver votes, what happens then?
My understanding is that it's rejected. There's no count. There's no votes.
So the state is just
gone.
Whoa.
And so this is what. And look, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a constitutionalist.
I don't know that that's exactly true. But it would have to be. I don't know that it's even been litigated before, so we wouldn't. It's hard to have a firm answer one way or another.
Yeah.
On the what was it? The Bedford's Law.
Bedford's
Law.
Yeah.
Point you made. It is interesting because.
Well, to clarify, it's not a point I'm trying to make.
That you referenced that people.
There's
like
people are posting these viral Twitter threads.
People are posting these threads. One thing that is definitely the case about this election, which is somewhat unusual, is that turnout nationwide went up across the board, across partisan lines. So we still have millions of votes to count, ridiculously at this point. But even up until now, something like 12% more total votes were cast in 2020 compared to 2016. And they weren't cast in a direction that's easy to delineate along partisan lines. So if you look at the map of the country, there are some places that skewed heavily Democratic, some places that skewed heavily Republican, and in 2016, the skew was almost universally toward the Republican, except in a few cases, like Northern Virginia, some affluent suburban areas, and you could kind of extrapolate what the reason for that partisan skew was. So it made sense that Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and Arlington skewed Democratic in 2016, whereas the other counties skewed Republican. But this year, it's harder to make any of those kinds of inferences, and there are these regional anomalies that are a little bit odd. And I'm not positing any conspiracy by any means. I'm just saying that if some of this stuff strikes you as odd, it's because even the people who are not in conspiracy land whatsoever are finding them odd and don't know exactly how to interpret them. So, for example, one thing that I wouldn't have expected is that in Minnesota, which the Trump campaign, I think, at least initially thought was possibly competitive, you see a pretty stark pro-Democratic skew, right? But in Iowa, parts of which are culturally and politically very similar to Minnesota, you see the opposite skew toward the Republican, toward Trump. And that's a little odd. I don't know exactly how to interpret that. And there are a bunch of other examples. If you had told me 2 weeks ago that Trump would win the 2nd congressional district in Maine by the margin he did, which is 7 points, I would have found it bizarre that would have been the case, and yet he also loses New Hampshire by something like 7 or 8 points. Like, because usually there are these inter-regional correlations. Or
Right.
at least that was definitely the case in 2016. The Midwest and the Great Plains swung hard to Trump, right? But this year in the Midwest and the Great Plains, you see these like patches of different partisan skews that, are going to take a little bit of more examination to understand the full meaning of.
People have noticed that in the partisan swing charts where it shows which areas, they keep posting photos saying, look at the state lines, because they don't make sense. Like the border of Ohio and Michigan, I think. Was Ohio bordering Michigan? I'm thinking Indiana. No, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I think so.
Michigan's northwest.
It's like you see Michigan is all going Democrat, and then like the states bordering it to the south are all going Republican, and it's like, what is like... I guess it could happen
with the internet. The fracturing of mentalities. You're maybe more like someone across the country than you are to your neighbor now that you're able to connect via the internet. That's one way to.
Yeah, but in 2016 there was a definitely observable regional correlation pretty much everywhere, and if there wasn't a regional correlation, you could infer that it was due to like socioeconomic status, median household income. There were like some metrics that you could use to make these results explicable, whereas in 2020 is much less explicable. I mean, there are certain things that you can pretty easily infer from. Like, so for example, the reason why Biden is ahead in Georgia is because of this transformation of the Atlanta area and the suburbs, namely the affluent suburbs. And there are other examples of that you can find around the country, but others where it's not, like that correlation doesn't hold. But, just to focus on Georgia, just because I happened to be there for like a week or so prior to the election, one thing that I think is worth underscoring about these results is that the Democratic Party's cultural and power and financial base is now indisputably in these affluent suburbs.
They're the party of Wall Street, the managerial elites.
Well, I mean, Wall Street was very much satisfied with this result. I mean, the Dow went up and so on and so forth. But because it's places like Cobb County, Georgia, Gwinnett County, Georgia, which are these affluent, growing population centers around metro areas, the Democrats are increasingly going to govern with their sensibilities in mind.
Right.
And if you think that translates into like economic populism, I think you're dreaming.
It could. There could be a big factor here in that COVID moved people around. People who lived in cities all of a sudden found themselves back in the suburbs with their family. Yeah. And this was always going to be a factor. So when you look at why there are these patches that we don't understand, it could very easily be that earlier in the year, COVID hit, people probably were like, I'm going to get out of the city. Then when the riots hit, people got out of cities. We knew they were 500,000 people from New York. So you got a bunch of wealthy New York people moving all across. Maybe that explains why Maine, swung for Trump in a certain way that New Hampshire didn't, because people moved very rapidly, and it was the individuals, not the exchange of ideas. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Yeah,
not relatable.
And different states have different regimens in terms of whether they sent out a universal mail-in ballot.
That's true.
Whether
too.
you had to apply for one, like in Georgia,
Yeah.
you actually had to apply for an absentee ballot, whereas like in New Jersey, where I live, it was automatic, which I know was controversial. But like a lot of this stuff really is bizarre. Like Los Angeles County, I can't get over. As of yesterday, when I checked, and it's probably more now, there were 200,000 more votes for Trump in Los Angeles County than there were in 2016.
Wow.
And Los Angeles County is actually trending Republican
Oh, that's amazing.
now, which
Well,
is
it's
like
because the rich people all leave, and the
I
poor
see it.
people are like, I'm going to vote Republican.
maybe there's something to that, but
Yeah.
like
They do.
I mean,
There's
I
people are
would have.
leaving.
You would have
Look at-
not
you-
had you. I would have not predicted that one.
You see Zapata County in Texas?
Oh yeah, I mean that's the best.
Hillary Clinton won it 2-1, and then Trump flipped it.
Amazing.
Hispanic county. And then you also saw in Miami, I think it was, what was it, the 20th or 27th district? Safe blue congressional seats turned red.
It's also
The woman
evidence-
started crying on the phone because she lost.
It's evidence for why direct democracy is so dangerous, because of the way people can flip on a dime and completely alter. If we didn't have a republic and it was just like you just needed a bunch of people to change their mind one day, like a populist candidate could just completely destroy the governance.
Oh, look at like mask wearing. Like early on with COVID, you had all these Republicans being like, "I'm going to wear a mask," and it was Fauci saying, "No," and then it flipped for some reason. Like that's I'm agreeing with you in that you could use a tribal issue to make people 180 their opinions in a short time span.
You know, another thing about this election is that it doesn't lend itself to easily reductionist tribal explanations
Yeah.
for the
kinda
right
weird.
or the left. I mean, I've been examining the Georgia results in detail because I wrote a piece that's going to be coming out this week. But, you know, I'll just pull up this data here because it's hilarious. Oh, sorry. So Trump would have won this election if he had just maintained the level of white support that he had in 2016.
Yeah.
And if
So
your
weird.
thesis for U.S. politics is this all-encompassing, you know, white supremacy, determinist belief system that is so prevalent in the media, then how do you explain that one? And one of the most stark examples is, to me, in Georgia, where you have the county with the highest proportion of black voters. In that county, Trump received 38% more total votes than he did
Wow.
in 2016. Whereas Biden received more than Hillary, but just 10% more. So the
Yeah.
skew there was for Trump.
Yeah.
Right. But then if you look at the whitest county in Georgia, and these are rural, relatively small counties, so you could see big shifts year to year. But nonetheless, in the whitest county in Georgia, Biden's vote total increased 34% compared to Hillary, and Trump's increased by a lesser percentage, is 26. So what does that tell you? That tells you if you are so mired in this kind of elite mentality where everything is black and white per the dictates of this ideology that they're so obsessed with, then you're missing just a huge amount of the political dynamics in the country around you. And you would think that if you're in the media and you're somebody who wants to be as attuned as possible to those dynamics, then you would do, I don't know, everything. But I can't imagine that they're actually going to do it. They're way too tethered to their ideological presuppositions.
They're trying to claim now. I'm seeing all the memes from the left that, you know, AOC was right. The districts that she helped that were for Medicare for all actually won, and the Democrats who didn't support and went moderate all ended up losing. And maybe there's an argument where if I'm going to vote for someone who's moderate, I'll go the safe route and not vote for the guy who wants to impeach the president and not get anything done. You vote for a Republican, maybe they'll actually do their job. Maybe that's the mentality.
Yeah, you
and
know,
maybe
in New Jersey, Jeff Van Drew,
he won.
he won.
Yeah.
He just said, you know, I don't want to impeach Trump. I'm going to switch parties. Boom, 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 bada boom. And then
Now
he gets reelected.
Yep,
He gets
that's huge.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because the one of the Democratic congressmen who did not vote to impeach Trump, there were only 3, I think, was in Minnesota, in one of these, you know, more rural districts that had been like a legacy Democratic district that the Republicans rightly thought that they could win. Colin Peterson,
Yeah.
and his not voting for impeachment didn't matter; he still lost anyway. So there are certain congressional districts that are going to be subject to nationwide trends, regardless of whether like you support Medicare for all or you voted to impeach Trump. It's almost like ineluctable, you know. And I think you see that when there's certain big shifts. But then again, it's sort of complicated because you have these patches of partisan trends that are kind of like in conflict with one another that don't make a ton of
weird.
sense. So it's gonna. I mean, this is gonna take a lot of time to quote unpack.
I think COVID played a big role in it. I do. I think and the riots moved people around in ways we don't yet understand. And a lot of these places had same-day registration. So you could have literally moved a week before.
Yeah.
Well, not literally, because they probably have some law like you got to be there at least 27 days or something. Some states. Now they're all going to go to Georgia. You hearing this? Like,
They're
For real.
gonna move to Georgia.
they are.
Yeah.
So the big thing now apparently is that Georgia has lax residency laws, and because the runoff will dictate control of the Senate. And if Republicans lose control of the Senate, it's going to be Democrat in every branch, except for the, I should say, not the Supreme Court, but it's going to be House, Senate, and presidency. And they're going to start passing everything and just steamrolling
Yep.
through. So now we're hearing, was it Andrew Yang said, I'm moving to Georgia. It's like,
Really?
really, dude?
Why?
I mean,
Wow.
even if the Democrats do gain control of the Senate, I wouldn't overestimate how simple it is for them to just get through whatever it is they want to get through. I mean, Trump and the Republicans had unified control for the first 2 years of his tenure. They couldn't get healthcare Obamacare repeal passed. I mean, they got a tax reform bill, but it's not as simple as you think. And there are always these kind of like anomalous senators within the coalition who need to be placated. I mean, Trump had Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and stuff.
Like,
By the way, Susan Collins winning was one of the most hilarious.
Is it
results.
because
Yeah.
certain senators are getting, I keep saying bribed, getting lobbied to vote a certain way, and if they're Republican or Democrat, the lobbyists don't care. They're just going to lobby enough people, whether...
Well, I mean, if you're Joe Manchin, who's the Democratic senator from West Virginia, clearly you're operating under a wholly different set of political incentives than if you're a Democratic senator from California, right? So, I mean, he is within an incentive structure that is going to put him off course with what the majority of the caucus wants, and so it's never going to be a given that Joe Manchin is going to support any particular legislative initiative. I mean, Joe Manchin voted for Kavanaugh and Gorsuch.
So
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Democratic senator from a certain state might be more conservative than a
Right.
Republican
But
senator from a certain state.
But we're losing that. We're losing that. I mean,
And that used to always be the case. I mean, there was
Yeah.
nothing surprising or novel about that for most of U.S. history, but we have seen polarization where it's almost like the parties act as parliamentary parties, where they vote in almost complete unison most of the time. Whereas there used to be these regional disparities where it didn't really matter if you were a Democrat or a Republican if you were representing in the Senate from Alabama or something.
and more than two
Alabama
parties,
just
right?
flipped Republican, though, doesn't it? Didn't it? It was the Alabama senator was Democrat, I think. I'll pull it up.
Yes. Doug Jones lost. That did flip. He lost to Tommy Tuberville, who was like the football coach.
Yeah.
Tuberville.
Yeah. So,
but the
and
Democrats
Colin
came-
Peterson too. So Colin Peterson was one of the two Democrats who didn't vote for impeachment. Or actually, I think Tulsi abstained. Did she?
She did.
She voted present. She voted
Present.
That's
Present.
Do you
She
guys
voted president on both
Do
articles.
you guys think there would be any value to regulating our government and saying you have to have a certain amount of parties in the government? You can't have more than like X amount of people per party.
No, because they just form coalitions.
They would,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have lots of parties in different parliamentary systems, like in Europe. Like
Right, it
look
works
at
for them.
Belgium; they have to have these wide coalitions and such.
Yeah.
And I think it's arguable whether these systems are more efficient. But one thing I think probably is valid is ranked choice voting, which is now being adopted
I think Maine
increasingly
does it.
around. Maine
Yeah.
has it. And people were saying, people were actually confident that Susan Collins might lose in Maine because the Green Party votes would go to the Democrat, and it just didn't matter at all. I mean, third parties were completely irrelevant. So, I mean, these polarization trends that are evident in the country might render it so that it's just naturally not the case that there's a desire for more than two parties.
but ranked choice is legit.
Ranked choice sounds pretty good in my opinion.
Yeah, so it's like,
But,
I think it makes, especially
I-
in a primary, it makes a lot of sense.
I
because
actually,
you could have more than one candidate you favor.
I actually watched a video where they did an algorithmic simulation of various voting methods. The method we have is called first past the post, and I think this is archaic, and I think it is held onto by people who just want to manipulate one person, one vote. That's fair, and it's like there's other ways to determine. Like ranked choice makes a lot of sense, but it's also not perfect. For those that aren't familiar, ranked choice would be like you have a list of candidates and you say, here's my first, second, third, fourth. You rank them based on what you think you want. That way, if you're like, I really want Jill Stein, I vote for her. But if Jill Stein loses, then your vote passes down to the next person, which would be,
Right.
Joe Biden or whatever.
Right.
And so that would create a better representation of who the people actually want. But this is going to be surprising because I didn't realize this. They did a simulation where they showed the same problem emerges. You can look at many countries where they have ranked choice voting. I think they mentioned Australia. I could be wrong. And they're like still two-party dominance. Because people get worried. I forgot why it happens, but it's a similar thing where it's like you run the risk of someone else getting more votes because your first choice is not like it's still a ranking system where someone might get more votes if you rank them at number 2 or something like that. And so I forgot how it worked. But anyway, the point was they did one called approval voting where you literally vote for anybody and everybody. You can vote as many times as you want. And they said that was actually the best system. So if there's 10 candidates, you can say, I vote for all of them, and you can walk away.
Oh.
Yep.
Interesting.
Alaska actually had a ranked choice party-run primary this year. So
Interesting.
like when they were 4 or 5, you could choose, number 1 Bernie Sanders, number 2 Elizabeth Warren, whatever. And there's no reason why that couldn't be replicated across the country, especially in primaries, which tend to be more a function of internal party processes If there's one election reform that I would love to be instituted nationwide because it best reflects my own beliefs, it's take the option that's on the ballot, to my knowledge, only in Nevada, which is on the ballot in Nevada for any election. You can vote for, quote, none of these candidates.
Yeah.
So it's just a wholesale rejection of everything,
I like
the whole
it.
system.
I love it.
And that's my preferred reform. I would love to vote for that.
The approval voting system was interesting because the idea was if there are, say, 10 candidates, you can say, I vote for this, and this, and everyone else can go away. And then basically it's just whoever gets the most votes to win. Most votes wins. And apparently they did a simulation where they found that it is the most likely system to accurately represent what people actually want.
Yeah, I think with ranked choice, the problem is your vote's going to end up being only going to whoever is the top two of everything. So if you vote for like a Democrat is number one and a Republican is number two, but the Republican doesn't make it into the final top two, your number two won't be your second choice. It'll defer to your third choice. So you want to put your Republican as your first choice. I think
it was something like if you've got 100 people and 60 of them vote for someone you like and you vote for that person, but like as your second choice or something, then it was something like people start betting against each other because they're worried about, someone bad getting in. So they pick their first choice, but then put their bet as their second choice. And then it creates two-party dominance with some minor choices here and there.
And what's this other one called? Where Approval.
Where it's just vote for as many times as you want.
So you're kind of voting for who you don't want.
Exactly. Yep. And so it ends up with everyone you count the votes and how many you can vote for one person one time, but you can vote for everybody. So I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. I'm not saying that's a perfect system. It was just a really interesting thing where they did a mathematical equation and then calculated how many times until they found accurate representation. And
the thing is, people speculate about the need for different facets of election reform every cycle, and almost nothing ever happens of note, at least on a national scale, right? Sometimes you do have state-based reforms, as in Maine, where they did adopt this ranked choice voting. But I remember in 2016, there was people pledging from the bottom of their heart that if we do anything in the next year and a half, it's going to be we're going to abolish the Electoral College. It was like, oh, okay, good luck with that.
That's a terrible idea, I think.
It used to be all for that. It's crazy.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
The Electoral College?
Yeah.
I don't even think it's worth having an argument as to whether it's good or bad. It just is. It's foundational to the country's founding principles, and we've done it for 250 years. So why have this recurring endless debate about whether it should or shouldn't be? There's pretty much zero chance ever that it will be changed. And if it was going to be changed, it would have been done while all the momentum was behind changing it in 2016, when you had all these exercised liberals saying that, oh my God, this horrible fascist backed by Russia has been foisted upon us because of the Electoral College. If that was the opportunity to reform it, it would have been that would have been when it was done, and it wasn't done.
Things can't just stay the same forever, though. That's why I'm like, we have an optimism bias. We think everything's going to just be the way it is, the way we remember. We're used to these elections where it's always like the night of at 3 a.m, they're like, the final polls are in and Barack Obama has won. And then, McCain is like, you ran a good campaign, Barack, and I concede. And that's like, we grew up with that, and that's normal to us. And now we assume nothing could change. It would be too weird. And that's an optimism bias. It just, everything's going to stay the same. The bad stuff can't happen. But certainly it will at some point. We can't just be stuck in this system. And if we don't
change it incrementally, it tends to happen all at once, which can be very dangerous.
Well, now you've got the progressive left. You've got I don't know if you saw that New York Mag story about the New York Times.
Yes, I did read that.
The staff of the New York Times saying we're standing at the barricades of historic change or something. Which side are you on?
Break.
It feels like there's a dam holding back a massive wave of a new. What I don't know what you called it.
Neo-fascism?
Is that sure?
Did I call it something?
Yeah. The dogma of the ideological left. I forgot what you called it. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I think I think there is an animated segment of the elite opinion making class which is incredibly
racist.
No, I didn't say that.
I did.
Yeah, you said it, not me.
Not me.
Although maybe I secretly believe it, but I won't admit it here. Which is just beyond exercised over these past 4 years. I think has been radicalized Definitely. I think social media is a huge factor in that because you constantly have to be performing in terms of how committed you are to various ideals, and the principle of journalism becomes subordinate to that. Not that journalism is ever some kind of pure principle that could be aspired to by everybody equally under all circumstances. But if you read that New York Magazine piece, it was clear that what was animating most of the people involved, at least who were quoted, in the enterprise of, furnishing the New York Times, they weren't motivated by principally journalism. It was a straightforwardly political objective, which is that we need to, I don't know exactly.
Overthrow the white cis heteronormative patriarchy?
Yeah, we need to defeat Trump. We need to
Totally change.
upend these systems of oppression.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.